The reason you can't get homeowners to say yes has nothing to do with your script and has everything to do with what's happening inside the seller's head while you're talking. I've closed hundreds of deals across more than 20 different states, and the difference between the calls that close and the ones that fall apart always come down to seller psychology. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what's happening in a seller's mind during your conversation, why most wholesalers accidentally trigger the exact response that kills their deal, and how to flip that so sellers actually want to work with you. Now, the first thing you need to understand is that sellers are not making logical decisions. They may think they are, but they are not. There is something called loss aversion, and it is the single biggest force working against you on every seller call. People feel the pain of losing something twice as much as strongly as the pleasure of gaining something of equal value. And in real estate, that shows up in a very specific way. Sellers anchor to what they paid for the property or to what Zillow tells them the property's worth. And when you come in with an offer below that number, even if the market supports it, even if the math is right, the seller's brain registers it as a loss, and they will fight that loss harder than they will chase a gain. That is why you can show the seller the comps, you can walk them through the repair costs, you can explain the ARV, do everything right, and they still say no. Because in their mind, they're not evaluating your offer. They're evaluating how much they are losing compared to the number they already have in their head. So the move is not to argue about that number, but to reframe what losing actually means. Because right now, that seller is losing money every single month that they hold the property in carrying costs, insurance, taxes, repairs, stress, all of it adding up while they sit there waiting for a number that is never going to come. And when you can get the seller to see that keeping the property is the loss, not selling it, that's when the conversation shifts. But loss aversion is only half the battle. Because even if you reframe the loss correctly, the seller still needs to trust you enough to actually move forward, and this is where it gets interesting. Sellers will take less money from someone they trust than more money from someone they do not. And I know that sounds backwards, but think about it. If a seller gets two offers, one at $180K from somebody who listened to their situation, explained the process clearly, and made them feel respected, and another at $185K from somebody who felt pushy and they rushed and they only cared about locking up the deal, that seller's going to take the $180K almost every time. Because motivated sellers are not just selling a house. They are handing over one of the biggest decisions of their life to an absolute stranger. And if that stranger feels like a used car salesman, it does not matter what the number is. You're going to have a very hard time getting them to sign. So the real question on every call is not how do I get my offer lower? It's how do I get this seller to trust me enough to where they will move forward with me. And that comes down to 5 specific things you can do on every single call that completely change how the seller responds to you. The first one you should have already heard about by now is mirroring. Essentially, when a seller says something important, you repeat the last 1 to 3 words of what they just said, and then you shut up. So if a seller says something like, I just cannot deal with the tenants anymore, you say, you can't deal with the tenants anymore? And then you wait. What happens is the seller keeps talking and gives you way more information than they ever would have if you had jumped in with another follow-up question. They tell you about the tenant who's not paid in 3 months, the eviction that they can't afford, the property manager who's absolutely ghosted them. And all of that is ammunition for your offer later. And you got it by saying 5 words and keeping your mouth shut. The second is labeling. So instead of asking the seller how they feel, you should tell them how they feel. If you can sense that the timeline is stressing them out, you say something like, it sounds like this timeline is really weighing on you. And if it feels like they've been holding on to this property for too long, you tell them it seems like it has become more of a burden than it's worth. When you name the emotion correctly, the seller feels understood, and that builds trust faster than anything else you can say on the call. Third, and this is one of the most important ones, is getting the seller to say, that's right. Not you are right, because that's dismissive, but that's right, meaning they feel fully heard, like you fully understand the situation. And the way you get there is by summarizing everything they've told you back to them. If they have told you that they've owned the property for 15 years and the tenants are behind on rent and they're paying the mortgage out of pocket, you repeat all of that back to them. And you end with something like, and at that point, would you rather just be done with it and move on? When they say, that is right, that is the moment they become flexible on price and terms because they feel like you actually understand their situation instead of just trying to get a deal out of them. Fourth is small commitments. Don't always go for that big yes, I'm ready to sign right away. You start by asking them, is it okay if I ask you a few questions about the property? Then you ask if they'd be open to running some numbers. And then you ask if they would be open to moving forward this week if you can land on a number that works for both of you. Each small yes makes the next yes easier because people want to stay consistent with the commitments they've already made. The fifth is how you ask questions. For instance, you should never ask why, because if you ask a seller why they want to sell, it starts to sound like an interrogation. But if you ask them what is making them think about selling right now, that is the same question with completely different energy, and the seller opens up instead of getting defensive. And by the way, if you want me to show you exactly how to use all of this on your specific deals, I'll leave a link in the description below where you can book a call with me and my team. We will break down your market, your pipeline, and what your first 90 days could look like. Now, those 5 techniques will get sellers to trust you, but one wrong move can undo all of it in seconds. And the biggest deal killer is pitching before listening. When you get on a call and you start talking about your company, your process, your offer, before you've even asked the seller a single question about their situation, you could have already lost them, because the seller doesn't give a shit about you. They only care about their problem. And if you do not show them that you understand their problem first, nothing else you say matters. The second is premature closing, which is essentially trying to throw out a number before you fully understand what's going on. And the seller feels that. They feel rushed. And when a seller feels rushed, they just shut down, because this is one of the biggest financial decisions of their life, and you're treating it like a speed run. The third one is subtle, but it kills more deals than people realize. If a seller tells you that they just need $150,000 to walk away, and you know the property's worth $300K, and your voice changes or you jump on it too fast, they're gonna feel that and they're gonna pull back. You have to understand that this person is already going through something difficult. They're already accepting a very painful loss. And the last thing they want is to feel like the person on the other end of the phone is celebrating while they're losing. So when you get a number like that, you stay calm, you stay neutral, you keep the conversation focused on solving their problem, not on how good the deal is for you. And the last one is follow-up. Most wholesalers call once, seller's not ready, and they just move on to the next lead. I cannot count on my fingers and my toes how many deals I have closed where the seller either didn't pick up the first time or just straight up told me to go to hell the first time we spoke on the phone. That doesn't mean they're not interested. It just means they're not interested right now, right? They're human. They may need time to process, talk to their family, sit down with it, make a decision. And if you are not the person who checks out a few days later, somebody else will be, right? And they will close the deal you already did all the work on. Now, after 6 years of doing this across more than 20 different states, I can tell you that every technique I just showed you will make you better on the phone if you're in traditional wholesaling. But no matter how good you get, you are still going to be fighting the same resistance on every single call, because the entire model is built on offering sellers less than what they believe their property is worth. You are fighting loss aversion, anchoring, and the seller's gut feeling that they're getting lowballed. You could do everything right and still only close about half the deals you put under contract because sellers get cold feet, buyers back out, or the numbers collapse once you dig deeper into the property. And on top of that, you could be spending $5, $10, $15, or like me, $50,000 plus per month on marketing just to keep enough leads in the pipeline to make those numbers work. Now, imagine taking every skill I just taught you and using it in a business model where the seller psychology is actually working for you instead of against you. This is luxury wholesaling. In luxury wholesaling, you're not going after distressed properties, and you are not offering below this estimate. You're going after large parcels of land, estate properties, and high-value real estate in markets where developers are actively building new build luxury properties. And Zillow's algorithm values the property based on the house, square footage times price per square foot, right? That's pretty much all that it sees. But these developers do not care about the house. They care about the land that the house is on top of. So a property might have its estimate of $800,000 based on the structure sitting on top of it. But a developer looking at the same lot sees $2 million in buildable land where they can tear the house down and put up 3 luxury homes. So you go to the seller, you offer them $1 million, and they can't believe it because you're offering more than any other buyer ever has. And this is where everything I just taught you about psychology comes full circle. That loss aversion I talked about earlier does not exist here because the seller is not taking a loss. They're getting more than they expected. The anchoring you would normally fight for the entire call is gone because you are above their anchor, not below it. And the trust barrier that takes 20 minutes to build in traditional barely exists because you're the person who just offered them more money than what they thought their property was worth. The entire psychology flips. And that is why the close ratio goes from about 50% in traditional wholesaling to over 90% in luxury. You're using the same skills, but instead of fighting the seller's brain on every call, the seller's brain does your job for you. My marketing costs dropped from being over $50K a month to under $2,000 a month because I don't need to blast thousands of leads when the deals are this big. My average assignment fee went from around $14,000 to over $100,000 per deal. And one of my students, Hunter, took this exact process after spending months grinding traditional wholesaling and closed a $96,000 luxury deal using the same skills he already had, just applied to a completely different type of property. And if you want to see exactly how deals like Hunter's $96,000 assignment actually get found and closed from start to finish, I made a full video breaking down the entire process step by step. So I'll link that in the description below. Go watch it and I'll see you on the other side.